It had been exactly 3 years, 4 months, and 11 days since I last heard my sister's voice. It was just a voicemail, full of static, but I had listened to it so many times that the sound of it was practically etched into my brain. Now, I stood at the edge of a massive, manicured cemetery, hidden under the drooping branches of a weeping willow tree. The rain was coming down hard, dripping off the leaves like tears, matching the heavy feeling in my chest. I wasn't supposed to be here. I hadn't been invited. Nobody in the official world even knew how to contact me to tell me she was dead. I had only found out because of a secret code we set up when we were just kids running away from a bad childhood, a fake obituary placed in a small-town newspaper that barely anyone read anymore. Isabella was the brave one who always ran toward the fire. I was the one who learned to be cold as ice to survive it. The funeral procession looked more like a military convoy than a grieving family. A line of expensive, black armored SUVs cut through the fog, their headlights slicing through the gloom. They wound their way toward the open grave like a dark snake made of steel. I pulled the collar of my trench coat tighter. The damp cold was seeping right into my bones. This didn't look like a gathering of sad friends and family. It looked like a meeting of wolves. I watched the men get out of the cars. They stood in a protective ring before the casket was even taken out of the hearse. Their eyes moved constantly, scanning the trees and the horizon like security cameras. I recognized that stance. It was military training or very high-level private security. They kept their hands near their chests, ready to reach for a weapon inside their jackets if a twig so much as snapped. I stood perfectly still in the shadows, a ghost haunting her own sister's funeral. The grass was a violent green against the black umbrellas that popped open all at once. And then I saw him, the man everyone was terrified of. The center of gravity. He stepped out of the lead car. He didn't even bother to hold his own umbrella. A guard was there instantly to shield him from the rain. He was tall, with a posture that screamed control and power. This was Min-ho Kong. He was a legendary figure in the criminal underworld, a powerful Korean mafia boss who had turned brutal violence into a corporate business strategy. He was the man my sister Isabella had married. He was the man who had failed to keep her alive. I watched Min-ho walk toward the grave. He moved like a predator, smooth and efficient. Even from far away, I could see the sharp line of his jaw and the cold, blank look on his face. He was wearing a perfectly tailored black mafia suit with a crisp white collared shirt that seemed to glow in the gray light. He didn't look like a husband mourning his wife. He looked like a king who had lost a valuable piece on a chessboard. Anger flared up in my chest, hot and blue. Isabella had been soft, full of light. I had told her to run. I had told her that a powerful Korean mafia boss like Min-ho Kong didn't know how to love. He only knew how to possess things. She hadn't listened. Now she was in a mahogany box being lowered into the wet dirt, and I was the only blood relative left to see it. I checked the security again. 3 guards on the North Hill, 2 by the stone mausoleum. There was a small gap in their vision on the east side. It was a narrow chance, but it was all I needed. I wasn't leaving without seeing her face one last time, or at least confronting the man who let her die. The rain got heavier, turning into a gray curtain that blurred everything. I made my move. I stepped out from the shelter of the willow tree. My boots were silent on the wet grass. I had spent years learning how to walk without making a sound. I wasn't dressed like a mafia wife. I was wearing severe dark clothes, my hair pulled back tight, wearing no makeup. I looked exactly like Isabella, but stripped of all her softness. I looked like a weapon made from the same steel. As I walked toward the grave, the outer ring of security guards noticed me. I saw them stiffen, their hands moving to their earpieces. But they didn't shoot. Confusion is a powerful weapon. They looked at me, and for a split second, they thought they were seeing a ghost. They thought the woman in the casket had climbed out and was walking through the rain. That moment of hesitation was all I needed to walk right past them. The silence at the graveside was total. It cut through the sound of the rain and the distant traffic. It wasn't a respectful silence, it was pure shock. I kept my eyes locked forward, ignoring the gasps from the few women in attendance. I walked until I was 10 feet from the casket, 10 feet from him. Min-ho was staring at the hole in the ground, his profile looking like it was carved from stone. He hadn't seen me yet. He was listening to the priest talk about peace, something I was sure a Korean Mafia boss didn't believe in. I stopped. The air around me felt electric. One of his top lieutenants, a man with a thick neck and a scar, stepped forward to grab me. "Don't," I said. My voice was low, but it carried. It sounded just like hers, but harder. Min-ho turned. He moved slowly, deliberately. When his eyes landed on me, the whole world seemed to stop. I saw a dozen emotions flash across his face in a second. Disbelief, shock, and then a terrifying, burning rage. The color drained from his face. He looked from the casket to me and back again. For a man who controlled an empire, for a man who knew everything that happened in his city, I was impossible. I was a glitch in his reality. He took a step toward me, stepping out from under the umbrella and letting the rain soak his expensive black suit. His eyes were dark pools that threatened to drown me. "Isabella?" The name was a whisper, a question that broke his perfect composure. "No," I answered, staring right back at him without blinking. "She's in the box, Min-ho. You put her there." The realization that I wasn't his wife hit him hard. The tiny bit of softness I had seen in his eyes vanished instantly, replaced by sharp, diamond-hard scrutiny. He scanned my face, looking for the differences. The small scar on my chin from a childhood fall that Isabella didn't have. The way I stood, balanced on the balls of my feet, ready to fight or run. The total lack of fear. He realized he was looking at a mirror image, but a reflection that had been hardened by a tougher life. He signaled to his men with a tiny flick of his fingers. The circle of guards closed in. The other mourners were quickly ushered away. We were alone now, except for his most loyal soldiers. "Who are you?" His voice was back in command, full of steel. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. Authority dripped from him like the rain. "The one she never told you about," I said. "The one who told her you would get her killed." Min-ho closed the distance between us. He was taller up close, radiating a heat I could feel even in the freezing rain. He reached out, his hand hovering near my face. It was a test. He wanted to see if I would flinch. I didn't. I stared up at him, analyzing him just as he analyzed me. I saw the tiredness around his eyes. He was a dangerous man, a killer in a bespoke suit, but he was also a man who had just seen a ghost. "Take her to the car," he ordered, his eyes never leaving mine.
Now. Two men moved to grab me.
I sidestepped the first one, grabbing his wrist and using his own momentum to twist his arm behind his back before he even knew what happened. It was a reflex, a warning. I shoved him away and smoothed my coat. "I can walk," I said coldly. "I'm not one of your assets to be handled." Min-ho watched my brief display of violence with a flicker of interest. He didn't look angry that I had embarrassed his man. He looked intrigued. He nodded once, giving me silent permission to walk on my own. I turned and headed toward the line of cars, feeling his gaze burning into my back like a laser. I had walked into the lion's den on purpose. Now, the gate had slammed shut behind me. The inside of the limousine was silent and smelled of expensive leather and ozone. Min-ho sat across from me. He had raised the partition, so we were completely cut off from the driver and the bodyguard in the front. He poured a drink from a crystal decanter. He didn't offer me one. This wasn't a social visit, it was an interrogation. He took a long drink, his eyes fixed on my face, studying my bone structure like he was looking for a flaw in a diamond. "Isabella was an only child," he stated flatly. It wasn't a question. It was a fact he had paid a lot of money to verify. His intelligence network was huge. The fact that I existed was an insult to his competence as a powerful mafia boss. On paper, I corrected him. Our parents were complicated. They separated us when we were 4. Isabella went with our father to the city. I went with our mother underground. You can't find records that were burned 20 years ago. And yet, here you are, he said, swirling his glass. wearing her face. I have my own face, I snapped. She was the one who looked like me. He leaned forward, the leather seat creaking. The air between us felt heavy and dangerous.
Why now?
If you stayed hidden for this long, why show up when she is dead?
What do you want? Money?
Leverage? Answers, I said, leaning forward to match his aggression. Isabella called me 2 weeks ago. She was terrified.
She said she found something.
Something she wasn't supposed to see. She said if anything happened to her, I had to come. Minho's expression didn't change, but the tension in the car spiked. The glass in his hand stopped moving. She said nothing to me. Of course she didn't, I said, my voice full of disgust. You were the one she was afraid of. That struck a nerve. I saw a flash of anger in his eyes, the muscles in his neck tightening against his white collar. He set the glass down hard on the side table. I did not kill my wife, he said, pronouncing every word clearly. I protected her. I gave her the life of a queen. You have no idea what you're talking about. Then why is she dead? I shot back.
A car accident?
On a private road? With your security detail? It's sloppy, Minho. Even for you. He laughed then, a dry, humorless sound. You think I am sloppy? You think if I wanted her dead, I would stage an accident? He shook his head, looking at me with a mix of pity and malice. If I wanted her dead, she would have simply ceased to exist. There would be no body.
No funeral.
No sister coming out of the woodwork. He was telling the truth. I could read people, and he showed no signs of lying. His eyes were steady. He wasn't lying about the method, which meant he was either innocent, or he was protecting the person who did it. Someone killed her, I said, trying a different angle. If it wasn't you, then you failed to stop it. Which makes you incompetent. It was a dangerous word to use. In his world, incompetence got you killed. His eyes narrowed. Careful, he murmured. You have her face, but you do not have her protection. I don't need your protection, I said. I need to know who killed my sister. And I'm not leaving until I find out. Minho looked at me for a long moment, calculating. I was a loose end. A twin sister appearing out of nowhere could cause problems for his business, raise questions about his late wife, and expose weaknesses. But I was also the only link to whatever Isabella had found. You're not leaving, he agreed, but his tone had changed. It was final. Possessive. You are right about one thing. Someone killed her. And until I find out who, you are the bait. Bait. I bristled, reaching for the door handle, even though I knew it was locked. They killed her because of what she knew, he said, his voice dropping to a low growl. Or maybe they killed her because they thought she was you. The implication hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. That's impossible. No one knows I exist.
Someone does, he said.
And now that you are here, walking around with her face, they will come for you to finish the job. If I let you go, you are dead within the hour. If you stay, he trailed off, his eyes sweeping over me. If I stay, I challenged. If you stay, you belong to me, he said. Until the debt is paid. The car slowed to a halt. We weren't at a police station. We were at the gates of a fortress, a massive estate of glass and steel perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean. His home. The place where Isabella had lived.
And died.
I don't belong to anyone, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline pumping through me. Minho opened the door, the cold ocean air rushing in. He looked back at me, a dark smile touching the corners of his mouth. We'll see. He stepped out, waiting for me. I had a choice. I could try to fight my way out, take down the driver and the guard, and disappear back into the shadows. But that wouldn't get me the answers. That wouldn't give me the head of the person who killed Isabella. I looked at the powerful Mafia boss standing in the rain, the devil who had offered me a deal. I took a breath, checked the knife in my boot one last time, and stepped out into the storm. I was in the lion's den now, and I intended to tear it down from the inside. Inside the estate, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of a library, it was the silence of a vacuum, where sound was swallowed by plush carpets and heavy velvet drapes. The house was modern, brutalist, all sharp angles and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto the gray sea. It was beautiful, cold, and totally lacking in warmth. It was a house designed for a statue, not a human being. I could feel Isabella's absence here. Minho handed his wet coat to a steward who appeared from nowhere. He stood there in his black trousers and white shirt, the damp fabric clinging to his muscles. The staff stared, their eyes widening, trays trembling in their hands. They thought I was her. I saw a maid cross herself. "Stop staring," Minho commanded, his voice cutting through the room like a whip. The staff scattered instantly, heads bowed. He turned to me. "My office. We have details to discuss." He led me down a long corridor. I followed, memorizing the layout. Exits, stairwells, keypads. I was mapping the cage. He opened a set of double doors and ushered me into a room that smelled of leather and tobacco. It was a masculine space, dominated by a massive desk and a wall of monitors displaying camera feeds from around the city. This was the nerve center of the Korean Mafia boss. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. "I prefer to stand," I replied, moving to the window. I didn't want to be in the lower position. Minho walked to his desk but didn't sit. He leaned against the edge, crossing his arms over his chest. "Isabella was investigating something," he said. "You said she called you. What exactly did she say?" "She spoke in code," I said, turning to face him. "She said, 'The garden is rotting.' It's a phrase we used when we were kids. It means the danger is coming from inside the house." Minho's eyes narrowed. "Inside? My organization? Or your family? Or your allies?" I stepped closer. "She said she found a ledger. Not digital. Physical. A black book." At the mention of the book, Minho's demeanor shifted. The calculated calm vanished, replaced by a sudden, intense focus. He pushed off the desk and closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. He grabbed my upper arms, his grip bruising. "Where is the book?" he demanded. His voice was rough, urgent. "I don't know," I lied. I knew exactly where she would hide it. We had the same hiding spots, the same mind. She didn't get to tell me. He stared at me, searching for the lie. He was close enough that I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. The scent of rain and expensive scotch overwhelmed me. This was the man my sister had slept with, the man she had loved. And now he was holding me with the same hands. The air crackled with a confusing mix of threat and tension. He wasn't looking at me like a sister-in-law. He was looking at me like a puzzle he wanted to break apart. "If that book exists," he whispered, "it could burn this entire city to the ground. And everyone in it, including you. Then we better find it before they do," I said, meeting his gaze. "But I do it my way."
No guards. No calles.
I move freely. "You move on a leash," he corrected, his thumbs tracing the line of my jaw, a gesture that was possessive and menacing. "You are my wife now. To the world. Isabella survived the accident. She is recovering, and you will play the part." "I'm not an actress, Minho." "You are a survivor," he said.
Adapt.
He let me go abruptly and walked back to his desk, pressing a button on the intercom. "Bring Mrs. Kang's medical file. And send the doctor. We need to document her miraculous recovery." I watched him, realizing the trap was fully set. He was going to use me to flush out the traitors. He was going to parade me in front of the people who killed her, daring them to strike again. I was the bait, and he was the hunter. But he didn't realize one thing. The bait had teeth. "One condition," I said. He looked up, an eyebrow raised. "I sleep in a separate room. And I want a gun." Minho smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. It was a terrifying sight. "You can have the room. But the gun? You have to earn that." He opened a drawer and pulled out a key card, sliding it across the polished wood. "Welcome home, Elena. Try not to die." The guest suite was a mockery of hospitality, a lavish cage with silk sheets and a view of the cliffside that offered no escape route. I spent the first hour tearing the room apart with my eyes, checking for bugs and cameras. Minho was thorough. I found a listening device in the smoke detector and a camera in the mirror. I left them. Disabling them would only prove I had skills I wasn't supposed to possess. The lock on the door clicked. I didn't turn immediately, watching the reflection in the glass. Minho entered without knocking. He had changed out of his wet funeral clothes into a fresh black dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle. He held a garment bag in one hand and a small, velvet box in the other. "Dinner is in an hour," he announced, his voice vibrating through the floorboards. "My associates are coming to pay their respects. They need to see you. They need to see that the rumors of your death were greatly exaggerated." "I'm not hungry," I said, turning to face him. I kept my distance. "It is not about hunger, Elena. It is about politics." He walked over to the bed and laid the garment bag down, revealing a dress that looked like it was woven from liquid midnight. It was backless and severe. Isabella wore pastels. She wore lace. He looked up, his eyes darkening. "You are not a pastel woman. This will suit you better." He beckoned me forward. My instinct screamed at me to fight, but the mission required me to play along. I walked toward him. He stepped into my personal space. He held up the dress. "Put it on," he murmured. "Or I will put it on for you." The threat wasn't violent. It was intimate. I snatched the dress from him, my fingers brushing his. The contact sent a jolt of electricity at my arm. "Turn around," I commanded. To my surprise, the powerful Mafia boss obeyed, leaning against the vanity and watching me through the mirror, the one with the camera. As I put on the silk dress, I saw his eyes in the glass, unblinking and hungry. The dining room was a huge hall with a long table of polished black wood. 5 men sat around the table. Their conversations died instantly as Minho led me into the room. His hand was on the small of my back, his thumb rubbing circles against the bare skin exposed by the low cut of the dress. It was a possessive gesture. Mine, his touch said, "Don't touch." I scanned the faces. I recognized 2 of them from the cemetery, the muscle. The other 3 were older men in expensive suits. One of them, a man with silver hair and a face like a crumpled dollar bill, stared at me with open suspicion. This was Victor, Minho's second in command. The one Isabella had mentioned in her letters as the snake in the garden. "Gentlemen," Minho said, his voice commanding absolute silence. "My wife. As you can see, the doctors have performed miracles." He pulled out the chair at the head of the table to his right and seated me. The action placed me in a position of power, elevated above the lieutenants. I wasn't just a trophy. I was seated at the right hand of the devil. "A miracle indeed," Victor said, his voice oily. "We were told the injuries were catastrophic. Yet, not a scratch on her lovely face." He raised a glass of wine, his eyes mocking. "Makeup is a wonderful tool, Victor," I said, my voice cool and steady. I picked up my own glass. "And perhaps my husband simply has a talented medical team on his payroll. Or are you disappointed to see me standing?" The table went deadly silent. Isabella would never have spoken like that. She would have smiled and looked down. I held Victor's gaze, challenging him. Beside me, I felt Minho tense, but when I glanced at him, he wasn't angry. He was amused. A flicker of pride shone in his dark eyes. He leaned back in his chair, one arm draped over the back of mine, his fingers brushing my bare shoulder. "She has had a difficult week, Victor," Minho said softly.
"Her temper is frayed."
"I find I quite like it." The dinner progressed in a haze of tension. Throughout the meal, Minho's attention was divided between his men and me. Under the table, his hand found my knee, his fingers tracing the line of my thigh. It was a distraction technique, meant to keep me off balance, but my body betrayed me. My pulse hammered. I hated him for the power he had, but the chemistry was undeniable. When Victor asked about the lost files, the ledger, Minho's grip on my leg tightened. It was a signal. "Listen." "The files were in the car," Minho lied smoothly. "Destroyed in the fire." "A shame," Victor said, slicing his steak. "Information is power. If that book were to survive, it would be very valuable to our competitors." If it survived, I interjected, leaning forward. Whoever held it would be a target. Wouldn't they, Victor? Victor's knife screeched against the plate. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw fear. And then I knew. He didn't have the book. He was looking for it, which meant the killer was still hunting. The dinner ended abruptly after that. Min-ho dismissed his men, but pulled me into the library. The moment the heavy doors shut, the pretense vanished. He backed me up against the rows of books, caging me in. You pushed Victor, he said, his voice a low growl. That was reckless. It was necessary, I countered. He was too close. The heat coming off him was intoxicating. I needed to see his reaction. He doesn't have the book, Min-ho. He's scared. He's a shark, Min-ho corrected, leaning down so his face was inches from mine. And you just bled in the water, he stared at my mouth. You are playing a dangerous game, Elena. You are not Isabella. Tonight, you looked like a queen, but you spoke like an assassin. Maybe that's what you need, I whispered. Isabella couldn't survive this. Can you? His eyes flashed. He brought his hand up to my throat, his thumb resting on my pulse point. He didn't squeeze. He just held me there. I can survive anything, he murmured. The question is, can I survive you? The question hung there. He leaned in, and I thought he was going to kiss me. I wanted him to. The realization horrified me, but the desire was a physical ache. I tilted my head back. His lips brushed the skin below my ear, sending a shiver through my body. The greenhouse, he whispered against my skin, his breath hot. Go to the greenhouse. Midnight. If you want to find what she hid. He pulled away abruptly, leaving me cold and trembling against the bookshelves. Go to your room, he ordered, his voice strained. Lock the door. And do not open it for anyone but me. The greenhouse was a massive glass building on the edge of the estate, filled with rare orchids. It was humid and smelled of earth. The rain hammered against the glass roof, drowning out the sound of my footsteps. I moved through the shadows. Min-ho had said midnight. It was 12:05. I found the spot Isabella had described in her coded voicemail. The rotting garden in the back corner. There was a bed of black flowers, wilted and dying. I knelt, digging my fingers into the cold dirt. My hand brushed against something wrapped in plastic. I pulled it out, a small black notebook. I wondered if you would figure it out. I spun around, clutching the book. Min-ho stood 10 feet away, a silhouette against the lightning. He wasn't wearing his jacket. His white shirt was soaked through from the rain, clinging to his chest. He looked wilder out here. He held a gun at his side, but it wasn't pointed at me. You knew it was here, I accused. Why didn't you take it? Because I needed to know whose side you were on, he said, walking toward me slowly. He put the gun away in his holster, a gesture of trust that hit me harder than a bullet. If you were working for Victor, you would have taken it and run. You're still here. I told you, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I want the truth. The truth is in your hands, he said, stopping right in front of me. He reached out, covering my hands with his, trapping the book between us. His hands were warm and rough. And now that you have it, there is no going back. You are in the war now. He looked down at me, rain shadows playing across his face. The tension that had been building since the funeral finally snapped. I didn't pull away. I stepped into him. I dropped the book to the dirt and grabbed the front of his shirt, yanking him down. He crashed his mouth onto mine with a hunger that was almost violent. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision. He tasted of rain and danger. His arms went around me, crushing me against him. For a moment, we weren't enemies or allies. We were just two broken things fitting together perfectly in the dark. Then, the sound of shattering glass broke the world apart. A window pane next to my head exploded inward. Min-ho reacted instantly, throwing his body over mine and tackling me to the ground behind a stone planter. A gunshot echoed through the greenhouse, deafening us. Stay down, he roared, drawing his weapon. Another shot chipped the stone inches from my face. I scrambled for the book and shoved it into my dress. It's Victor, I hissed. He followed me. He followed us, Minho corrected. He peered over the edge and fired 2 controlled shots into the darkness. A cry of pain answered. There are 3 of them, at least. We were pinned down. The romantic haze was gone, replaced by cold, hard tactics. I looked at Minho. He was bleeding from a cut on his cheek, but his eyes were clear. He looked at me, and for a second, the mask dropped completely. He looked terrified, not for himself, but for me. "Can you shoot?" he asked.
Better than you, I said.
He actually smiled. He pulled a backup pistol from an ankle holster and slid it across the dirt to me. "Cover the left. I'll take the center." On 3-inch. I gripped the cold steel of the gun. This I understood. This was easier than the emotions I had just been feeling. 1, he counted.
2.
3-inch. We moved together. I popped up, aiming for the muzzle flash near the orchids. I squeezed the trigger. I saw a shadow drop. To my right, Minho was a machine, moving from cover to cover, firing with lethal precision. It was a dance of violence, and we were perfect partners. We weren't just protecting ourselves. We were protecting each other. When a gunman tried to flank us, aiming at Minho's back, I didn't hesitate. I put 2 rounds in his chest before he could pull the trigger. Minho turned, seeing the body fall. He looked at me, breathless. In the middle of the carnage, with rain pouring through the shattered roof, the connection between us became unbreakable. We were forged in this fire now. The silence that followed was heavy. Minho checked the bodies. He rolled over the last gunman, Victor's personal bodyguard. "It's done," he said, putting his weapon away. He walked back to me, ignoring the blood on his shirt. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and cupped my face. He ran his thumb over my lip. "Are you hurt?" "No," I said, though my hands were shaking now that the rush was fading. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight, his face buried in my neck. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "I thought I lost you again." The words hung in the air. Again. He wasn't talking about Isabella anymore.
He was talking about me.
In the short time we had known each other, I had become something he couldn't afford to lose. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, pulling back to look at him. "We have the book. We have the proof. We take them down, Minho. All of them." He nodded, a hard, ruthless light returning to his eyes.
"Yes."
"We burn the garden." He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. We walked out of the ruined greenhouse, into the storm, not as a Mafia boss and his fake wife, but as the king and queen of a kingdom we were about to conquer together. I had come here to find a ghost, but I had found a future. A dark, dangerous future. And God help me, I wanted it. I looked at Minho Kong, at the deadly promise in his eyes, and I knew Isabella had run from the fire. I was going to rule it.